the Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, Honorable Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, the Honorable Ministers of Government, Director, African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery, and Professor, School of Social Work, University of Georgia, Dr. David Okech, colleagues, APRIES staff, and the University of Georgia, the U.S. Department of State, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, members of the National Task Force on Human Trafficking, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to the Sierra Leone Program Against Child Trafficking launch event, co-hosted by the African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery at the University of Georgia School of Social Work, the U.S. Department of State Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, the U.S. Embassy in Sierra Leone, and World Hope International. My name is Umaru Fofana. I'm the in-country coordinator, Sierra Leone, for African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery. This program launch marks an important step towards justice for child trafficking survivors in Sierra Leone. We are especially honored to be joined today by senior officials of government who dedicate their time to liberate victims of trafficking and help them recover. Of course, no government, no nation can meet this challenge alone. Everybody has a responsibility. We are going to do more to spot it and stop it. Therefore, this project is complementing the invaluable efforts by the government of Sierra Leone and its partners to understand the prevalence rate of child trafficking and profile evidence-based interventions that will sustainably reduce child trafficking in Sierra Leone. Sierra Leone is a source, transit, and destination country for children, women trafficked for the purposes of forced labor and commercial sexual exploitation. Trafficking within the country is more prevalent than transnational trafficking, and the majority of victims are children. Within the country, women and children are trafficked from rural provinces to towns and mining areas for domestic servitude, sexual exploitation, and forced labor in diamond mines, petty trading, petty crime, and for forced begging. Women and children may also be trafficked for forced labor in agriculture and the fishery industry. At this launch event, APRIES will also reveal the result of its innovative research to measure the prevalence rate of child trafficking. Speakers from the government of Sierra Leone and key partners will share their vision for the future of anti-trafficking efforts in Sierra Leone. Please send your comments to the host, Clara Bolton, using the Zoom chat. We now go to our speakers, and I will start with our first speaker, who is in charge d'affaires, Ellen M. French from the U.S. Embassy in Freetown. Over to you, Madam Ellen.
Thank you, Mr. Umaru Fofana. Good afternoon to those in Sierra Leone and good morning to those joining from the United States. I'm pleased to be here with you today and joining the Honorable Vice President of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, Honorable Ministers, His Excellency, Ambassador Sadiq Abubakarwai, and other members of the Diplomatic Corps, Acting Director Dr. Carrie Johnstone, and colleagues in Washington, officials, and our honored virtual guests on this important issue. Thank you also to our co-hosts, representatives of APRIES, the University of Georgia, and World Hope International. On behalf of the U.S. Embassy Freetown, we are delighted to help launch the Sierra Leone program against child trafficking. I would like to also extend a special thank you to the Honorable Vice President for his continued commitment to combating trafficking and agreeing to take part in today's program. Worldwide, more than 25 million people are trapped in modern-day slavery, denied freedom and human dignity. This global threat demands a comprehensive and collective response. The United States is proud to work in partnership with governments like Sierra Leone, as well as international and civil society organizations, local advocates, and activists to put an end to this crime. We are especially proud to partner with the APRIES program, which combines innovative research with robust partnership and collaboration in the fight to end child trafficking. Prosecution of traffickers, protection of victims, and prevention of the crime are sometimes described as the 3 Ps in the fight against human trafficking. The government of Sierra Leone has continued its efforts in these 3 Ps by prosecuting and convicting traffickers, strengthening in collaboration with foreign governments and international organizations, and partnering with civil society to assist survivors. This progress must be commended. But in order to end human trafficking, we must continuously redouble our efforts, and I want to encourage the anti-trafficking community in Salone to take on 2 more Ps: prioritization and perseverance. First, prioritization. We call on all our partners to continue prioritizing the fight against human trafficking and to focus on the worst actors who exploit the vulnerable. We must prioritize actions and prosecutions that break up the criminal networks and increase accountability. This effort will also require conversations around the role and expectations of children, who, in difficult circumstances, are often made vulnerable while seeking education or employment to support their families. Children need our protection, support, and care, and the future of our societies depends on their well-being. Second, perseverance. Despite pandemics, despite poverty, despite conflict and setbacks and defeats, we must persevere in efforts to protect survivors, bring perpetrators to justice, and keep the well-being of our most vulnerable at the forefront. It has been a difficult, challenging year for all of us, but we cannot rest in our struggle to end human trafficking. Together, we can make progress in this fight, provided we remain clear-eyed in our priorities and persevere in the face of challenges. Together, we can end human trafficking in Salone and around the world. The United States Embassy in Freetown is proud to partner with the government of Sierra Leone, APRIES, and World Hope International to advance this fight. Thank you.
We now move to our next speaker, Dr. Karen Johnston, Acting Director of the Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons at the U.S. Department of State. Over to you, Dr. Karen Johnston.
Thank you very much, and hello. Thank you also to Chargé French for those powerful words. We must all commit ourselves to prioritizing this work as we persevere through the pandemic. Thank you also to Vice President Jalloh, for your leadership on this issue. We are thrilled to have you with us and look forward to continued cooperation in our global efforts to combat human trafficking. Thank you also to Ambassador Y for your partnership and support of this event. Ending human trafficking is a goal we all share, and we are grateful for the partnership with leaders across the government of Sierra Leone and civil society, many of whom are with us today. We are encouraged by the Sierra Leone government's recent actions to combat this crime, including its continuing progress on convicting traffickers. Holding traffickers accountable is crucial to providing justice for victims, ending impunity, and reducing the prevalence of human trafficking through the deterrence effects of robust prosecutorial efforts. We also welcome the government's new action plan. We hope that this action plan enhances coordination across the government to support those with lived experiences of human trafficking. The United States is committed to fighting human trafficking internationally as well as domestically. In 2017, the Department of State launched the Program to End Modern Slavery, a groundbreaking initiative to substantially and measurably reduce the prevalence of human trafficking. To achieve this goal of prevalence reduction, the program places a high emphasis on the role of research and evidence to guide programming activities. We are proud to be here today with our partner, the African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery at the University of Georgia, APRIES, to launch its new program, which is based on strong data and evidence. APRIES consistently demonstrates thoughtfulness and expertise in their work alongside our office. The COVID-19 pandemic has caused immense turmoil and suffering across the world and has disproportionately affected the most vulnerable and marginalized communities, including human trafficking victims, and increased vulnerabilities on which traffickers prey. We recognize that the pandemic has also imposed operational constraints. We are impressed by APRIES' ability to conduct rigorous scientific research during these challenging times. The prevalence study and qualitative baseline APRIES will present today will form the basis of an evidence-driven approach, allowing programs to be more targeted with the goal of holding traffickers accountable and providing services to victims. To combat child trafficking in Sierra Leone, APRIES is working alongside World Hope International, a long-standing partner of the Trafficking in Persons Office. We applaud the government of Sierra Leone for its continued collaboration with World Hope International, including the donation of a building for a permanent location of the Recovery Center. We look forward to the future success of this program made possible by the partnerships represented today. Thank you all for attending this event. The U.S. government is committed to this project and to assisting Sierra Leone in its efforts to combat human trafficking. We look forward to working with you all to achieve this important goal and this important work. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carrie Johnston, for that great remark. We now go to our next speaker, Madam Bendu Dasama. She is the Honorable Minister of Social Welfare, Republic of Sierra Leone. Welcome, Madam Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Vice President, colleague ministers of government, members of the Diplomatic and Consular Corps, members of the National Task Force on Human Trafficking, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to make a statement at this virtual launch of Sierra Leone's Child Trafficking Program. Today's event is co-hosted by the African Programming Initiative to End Slavery. Today's launch event comes a few days following another virtual meeting where APRIS baseline research on the prevalence of child trafficking in 3 target districts of Pono, Kailaon, and Kenema were discussed. Early findings discussed at that meeting gave estimates of trafficking prevalence per households surveyed in those districts. Then, to reduce prevalence, some policy and service gaps were identified that should be bridged. Even though APRIS is yet to release the full report of the baseline study, their findings seem to support additional measures already being taken by the government to combat trafficking in persons in the country. These measures are contained in a 3-year national action plan against trafficking in persons, especially women and children, as they are the most vulnerable. In developing this plan, the National Task Force on the Human Trafficking in the Ministry of Social Welfare held a nationwide consultations during which gaps in preventing, suppressing, and punishing human trafficking offenses in our communities were identified. As the Minister of Social Welfare, I have been following closely the task force in the implementation of the plan. In that regard, I am happy to report here that the task force is currently conducting trainings for members of the recently established district task forces on detecting trafficking, identifying victims, and referring them for protective services. This is to ensure that each victim identified within any community can have access to all services. Secondly, an operational manual on trafficking hotline has been drafted as part of process towards the establishment of a dedicated anti-trafficking hotline that would not only help to forestall trafficking incidents, but also help in identifying victims for protective services. This is because Many of the trafficking cases in our communities involve relatives or acquaintances, so most of these incidents go unreported. On the policy front, I am also happy to report that sometime this month, we may have a bill replacing the Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2005, if Law Officers Department keep the drafting momentum. It is, however, likely that a new anti-human trafficking and smuggling legislation will be enacted by Parliament sometime this year. The new law would not only improve access for survivors by abolishing preliminary investigations at the magistrate court, it would also make trafficking a risky business through stringent punishment and other redress mechanisms. Let me conclude by saying that the Ministry of Social Welfare welcomes efforts by APRIES to engage in research on child trafficking in Sierra Leone and work with the National Task Force on Human Trafficking, including World Hope International, to implement post-research activities in trafficking prevention and prosecution, as well as the protection of survivors for evidence of impact. I thank you all for your attention.
Right, thank you so much for that video, and we do appreciate it so much. Our next speaker is Madam Manti Tarawali, Honorable Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, Republic of Sierra Leone.
I am Manti Tarawali, and I am the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs. Child trafficking, as defined by UNICEF, is the recruitment, transportation, transfer, harboring, or receipt of children for the purpose of exploitation. It is a violation of the rights of children, their well-being, and the denying of opportunities to children to reach their full potential. Quite frankly, this ought to be a concern of every human being because it is a debasement of our common humanity. It ought to concern every community because it tears at our social fabric. It ought to concern every business because it distorts markets. It ought to concern every nation because it endangers public health and fuels violence and organized crime. Nelson Mandela put it this way: there can be no keener revelation of a society's soul than the way in which it treats its children, end of quote. Children reflect the way societies are framed by how it protects them and how it supports them to prepare for the future. Regrettably, the task of government to protect children is becoming an uphill battle because of the complexities of child trafficking, which is nothing short of modern day slavery. Because when a child is married off by her family to an old or unsuitable man, then runs away from that marriage and ends up imprisoned in prostitution, that's slavery. When a child is sent to live with a family in the city and is maltreated by the family, and the child chooses to run away and later turns into a child soldier, forced to kill or to be killed, that's slavery. Our child is forced by her parents to marry, and she does, and is repeatedly, physically, sexually, and emotionally abused by her husband or his family. That too is slavery. It is barbaric, it is evil, and it has no place in a civilized society. While legal instruments are essential, the cooperation on a national, regional, and international level is essential to ensure countries comply with existing anti-trafficking legislations. Currently, there are various local and international initiatives, such as the Interpol database to identify victims and extraterrestrial legislation regarding child sex tourism, which allows authorities to share information, monitor, extradite, and prosecute offenders. Recent studies have revealed that Sierra Leone has 20,000 children living on the streets, resulting from many issues, including poor parenting. These children are at serious risks of being trafficked both internally and externally out of Sierra Leone. These are alarming prospects, and as the Minister of Gender and Children's Affairs, it is important that we address the very root of the matter. The responsibility that parents face, particularly single parents, raising a child or children on their own, is important to look at. For these reasons, we are reviewing the Child Rights Act of 2007 to strengthen the child protection mechanism and create opportunities to financially support particularly single parents raising their children. I am expected to take the revised act to Parliament in the second quarter. Also, with support from DSTI, we are strengthening the Child Protection Information Management System to intensify data collection and governance across the child protection landscape. In partnership with the Ministry of Social Welfare and UNICEF, we have developed a national parenting strategy, which is in pilot. Last year, we also developed a street children strategy, and this year, we are targeting the reunification and reintegration of at least 5,000 children on the streets in the implementation of the strategy. And finally, let me end by registering my unequivocal support for this multi-sectoral project. No one institution can do this work. And more broadly, the underlying forces that push so many into bondage in the first place must be addressed. His Excellency, the President of Sierra Leone, Brigadier Retired Dr. Julius Maada Bio, launched our gender equality and women's empowerment policy last year. We are committed to commencing implementation of the policy this year. With development and economic growth that creates opportunities, especially for women, there's less likelihood of indentured servitude. There's also the high probability of a sense of justice that says no child should be exploited, and a genuine commitment to gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam Honorable Minister, for that remarks. We now go on to our next speaker. Please join me to welcome Mrs. Melrose Kamenti. She is the Honorable Deputy Minister of Local Government and Rural Development, Republic of Sierra Leone. Over to you, Madam Melrose Kamenti.
Thank you very much, Umaru. The Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Ministers of Government, distinguished panelists, and participants, I am pleased to be part of this very important virtual launch event of the Anti-Child Trafficking Program. Trafficking in person, including that of children, is a crime. Child trafficking is tragic and refers to the exploitation of girls and boys, primarily for forced labor and sexual exploitation. According to Save the Children, children account for 27% of all the human trafficking victims worldwide, and 2 out of every 3 child victims are girls. Every country in the world is affected by human trafficking. As a result, children are forced to drop out of school, risk their lives, and are deprived of the great future that every child deserves. In Sierra Leone, as in many countries, child trafficking issue is of great concern to governments and in development partners. According to some researchers, some of the causes and contributors to child trafficking have been attributed to various factors, including but not limited to social, cultural, economic, legal, political, and individual. Economic factors have included limited economic options that have forced children to migrate because of poverty in search of better opportunities. Poverty in Sierra Leone, as in most sub-Saharan countries, have exacerbated vulnerability to trafficking. Legal and political factors, including war and conflict in neighboring countries, in Sierra Leone and in neighboring countries, have all contributed with trafficking risk. Porous borders. There is a general acknowledgement that Sierra Leone's borders are extremely porous, with so many illegal crossing points. Lack of enforcement of existing regulations also worsen border fluidity. Cultural factors, such as acceptability of child labor within Sierra Leone. According to UNICEF's recent research, as many as 60% of urban children and 68% of rural children between ages 5 and 14 are engaged in child labor. Child labor is further reinforced by the general view that children have an obligation to help support their families. Against this backdrop, there is need for continued engagement of all stakeholders to develop programs, policies, and responses that will address trafficking in persons, particularly child trafficking. A holistic approach, therefore, of prevention, protection, and prosecution is critical. Prevention of trafficking at the community level by creating awareness of the risk of migration. Providing support to children who have been trafficked and help them return home and reintegrate into their communities. Instigate legal reforms and improve law enforcement to protect survivors of trafficking. It is also worth noting that supporting livelihood will help families avoid the need for child labor. It is also important that stakeholders, development partners, civil society launch sustained advocacy campaigns around the issues already highlighted around child trafficking. Finally, development partners, civil society, government can support public policy and training that will help in prevention of child trafficking and monitor its implementation. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Melrose Kamenti. Indeed, collaboration is very key, and I appreciate that so much. Now, please enjoy a short video introducing APRIES research and program in Sierra Leone. Enjoy your view. Thank you.
Nice.
The African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery, or APRIES, is a consortium of international policy advocates and researchers from the University of Georgia in the US and the University of Liverpool in the UK. APRIES works to reduce the prevalence of modern slavery around the world with a focus in sub-Saharan Africa by transforming the capacity of community-engaged agencies to implement prevention, prosecution, and protection strategies. Our theoretical framework, based on the collective impact approach that entails a commitment to a common agenda with stakeholders, including survivors, of meeting clearly defined objectives to reduce the prevalence of human trafficking. Our current projects that focus on anti-trafficking research and programming are in Guinea, Senegal, and Sierra Leone. In other parts of the world, we are involved in prevalence estimation studies in human trafficking. We estimate trafficking prevalence and identify service and policy gaps that can be bridged to reduce prevalence. In Sierra Leone, we focus on child trafficking. Between 2011 and 2016, children accounted for 55% of trafficked persons in sub-Saharan Africa. In Sierra Leone, we found that the informal kinship arrangements, such as the traditional men-pikin, can sometimes enable trafficking. Our household surveys also showed that a number of children had been trafficked in the 3 regions of Kenema, Kono, and Kailahun. We are starting research in Cambia this year.
The first round of our research identified service and policy gaps around child trafficking in Sierra Leone. We wrote a report which you're welcome to read, and I'm going to introduce 4 of the key insights for policy and programming. The first is the need to work together. That means both customary and conventional forms of justice, and creating pathways and joint structures to improve the identification of victims and access to justice for them and their families. Second, we identified a need for programs that prioritize both redress and rehabilitation for survivors, and for those solutions to be realistic, appropriate, and sustainable. Third, there's a need for more evidence about what works in terms of laws and policies. Future research should gather this evidence and look at educational and employment outcomes for survivors of trafficking in the short and longer term. For example, awareness raising can be very useful, but it needs to be more focused and can be based on more rigorous research to target the right groups and work out what benefits it has. Lastly, our research identifies some challenges around communities and trust in the authorities. There is thus a need to build that trust through sustained engagement, inclusive partnership with evidence of impact.
The results of all our research will inform our program with World Hope International. We are working together to understand the implications of the service and policy gaps and prevalence rates for effective anti-trafficking programs in Sierra Leone.
We're excited to launch these programs with World Hope International in 2021. Our big picture goal for programming is to see a measurable reduction in the number of children trafficked by focusing on the 3 Ps: prosecution, protection, and prevention.
World Hope International is a relief and development organization working with vulnerable and exploited communities to alleviate poverty, suffering, and injustice. We have operated in Sierra Leone for over 20 years, implementing health, education, emergency response, human rights, water and sanitation, agriculture, and rural development programming. Some highlights of our programming with APRIES include working with paramount chiefs to strengthen the anti-trafficking bylaws in communities, providing psychosocial support to trafficking survivors, and working with community groups in Kenema, Kono, and Kailaun districts to prevent future trafficking. We are grateful to the United States Department of State for their support and look forward to partnering with APRIES to reduce the prevalence of child trafficking in Sierra Leone.
Right. I hope you enjoyed that short video. Our next speaker is the Dean Anna M. Shirt, Dean and Professor of the School of Social Work at the University of Georgia. Over to you, Joanna.
Thank you so much. This is such an important collaboration and urgent work, and I'm honored to be here today. I know we have a number of special participants who are here with us, and I wanted to take a moment to bring you thanks and greetings, specifically on behalf of the University of Georgia and the School of Social Work. First, the Honorable Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, and our keynote speaker. It's an honor. Also, the several honorable cabinet ministers and senior government officials of the Republic of Sierra Leone who are here. Thank you. In addition, Ms. Elaine French, Chargée d'Affaires, U.S. Embassy Freetown, U.S. Department of State, Dr. Kari Johnstone, Acting Director, Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, U.S. Department of State, U.S. Diplomatic Corps members in Freetown, Department of State officials in Washington, D.C., World Hope International leadership and staff, and other distinguished guests. Greetings to all of you on behalf of the university. The School of Social Work is so proud to be part of this initiative. Social work as a discipline is deeply committed to protecting and promoting the well-being of vulnerable and marginalized people, and to promoting social justice in collaborative ways. The work of APRIES and this important work in Sierra Leone fits within the heart of our profession's mission. APRIES, I know, is proud to do this work with local researchers and implementation partners because of a deep commitment to a participatory approach. And I also know this mission has been mutual. The government of Sierra Leone has been extremely supportive of these efforts, as we've clearly heard in prior comments. The University of Georgia and the School of Social Work will also continue to support APRIES to be successful in Sierra Leone. We look forward to the ongoing success of the project and to hearing about its many positive impacts. One final thought. Please know that while this virtual launch is wonderful, we would also love to see you in person. So remember, please, that you are welcome at the University of Georgia anytime you're in Atlanta. We hope to see you. Thank you again for being here and for all you do. With that, I'll hand this back. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dean Anna M. Short. That was so great. We go to our next speaker, Dr. David Okech. He's the director of the African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery, APRIES. And he is professor at the School of Social Work at the University of Georgia. Over to you, Dr. Okech, for your remarks. Thank you.
So thank you so much, Umaru. So, the Honorable Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, Vice President, Republic of Sierra Leone, Honorable Cabinet Ministers and Senior Government Officials of the Republic of Sierra Leone, CDA Ellen French, Charge d'Affaires, U.S. Embassy of Freetown, U.S. Department of State, and congratulations, Ms. French, on your recent promotion. Dr. Carrie Johnston, Acting Director, Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, U.S. Department of State, World Hope International leadership and staff, other distinguished guests, all protocols observed. Good morning in the US and good afternoon in Sierra Leone. On behalf again of the African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery, it is my distinguished pleasure to be here for the launch of our program. I will start with a brief background. This 5-year project began with a scoping trip to Sierra Leone in February of 2019 with key stakeholders to identify potential priority areas and populations. Kailahun, Kenema, and Kono emerged as priority areas and child exploitation as the more pressing problem. The overall goal of this project is to measurably reduce the prevalence of child trafficking in our target areas. We have completed the baseline study and have now entered the implementation phase of the project. My presentation is a very brief summary of the baseline results. A full baseline report is forthcoming. This project, as you all know by now, is funded under a cooperative agreement by the US Department of State, Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons, Programs to End Modern Slavery. APRIS is an international consortium of anti-slavery researchers and policy advocates from the University of Georgia in the US and the University of Liverpool in the UK. Our mission is to better understand the complex system of modern slavery and to take action to prevent and end modern slavery. We recognize that modern slavery is a complex, multidimensional, and socioeconomic problem that no single entity can tackle successfully. Currently, APRIS has a team of 20 people spread across 3 continents and 5 countries, including in Sierra Leone. We thank our research collaborators, that is a CMDA from Sierra Leone and RAN from Uganda. The pictures show enumerator trading in Kenema and our collaborators at CMDA. We have completed mixed methods baseline studies in our target areas to identify service gaps and to estimate the prevalence of child trafficking in those areas. The first part of our research was in-depth qualitative interviews and focus groups with 140 stakeholders. Qualitative data focused on identifying service and policy gaps for our target population. We found 4 key insights. 1, fewer trafficking prosecutions point to the need to incorporate formal and informal adjudication systems. This means creating pathways and joint structures to improve the identification of victims. We thank the government of Sierra Leone on the current efforts to revise the 2005 Anti-Human Trafficking Act, as well as the 2007 Child Rights Act. 2, There is need for appropriate and sustainable programs that both redress and support reintegration for survivors. 3, there is need for evidence about the effectiveness of current efforts. Finally, there is therefore need to build trust with authorities through sustained engagement, inclusive partnership, and evidence of impact. In other words, a comprehensive, multi-sectoral, and holistic approach is necessary to sustainably reduce the exploitation of our children, a problem that compromises their future. The second part of our study comprised household surveys whose goal was to estimate the prevalence of child trafficking. We surveyed over 3,000 households in the 3 target regions. About 1,000 heads of households per region were interviewed. Our preliminary findings showed that the 1-year prevalence rate of trafficking among children aged 5 to 17 in the sampled households was Kailahun, 33%, Kono, 46%, and Kenema, 27%. In Kailahun, for example, we found 573 trafficked children out of 1,743 total children in the households. In Kenema, we found 807 trafficked children out of 3,029 total children in the households. And in Kono, we found 702 trafficked children out of 1,537 total children in the households. These numbers include different types of child trafficking, and we expect the number to rise once our analyses are complete. So using these findings, we are partnering with World Hope International, or WHI, through the following 3 main programs and activities. 1, improve prosecution of perpetrators of child trafficking. WHI will work with key actors in Sierra Leone, including paramount chiefs, district councils, and city councils to operationalize the policies that will be outlined in the revised National Anti-Human Trafficking Act of 2005, the Child Rights Act of 2007, and other key legislation. WHI will also work directly with child trafficking survivors to navigate the legal system. We acknowledge that last year in Sierra Leone, there were 5 prosecutions in the area of human trafficking, and we thank the government of Sierra Leone for those efforts. 2, enhance protection of child trafficking survivors. Child trafficking survivors will receive comprehensive care, including psychosocial counseling, life skills development training, and support to reintegrate into appropriate communities. These services are vital for the well-being of survivors of child trafficking, who are often heavily traumatized by the experiences. WHI will provide the mental, emotional, and practical support that they need to thrive. Finally, strengthen prevention of child trafficking. Child trafficking is a structural problem that needs preventive solutions. WHI will support village parent groups to identify and report cases of potential child trafficking in their communities. Other key groups will also be trained, such as law enforcement and child welfare committees. There will be school-based activities using youth clubs that educate communities on child trafficking and promote the rights of the children themselves. We are so excited about the future. In the coming years, APRIES is committed to a more meaningful partnership and engagement. We are excited that our soon-to-be approved new Center on Human Trafficking and Outreach will build capacity within Sierra Leone through our continued work with CMDA and others. I tell people that good intentions alone are not sufficient in anti-trafficking work. Good intentions must be guided by concrete efforts that are based on data. However, data must be interpreted within local context so as to provide meaningful guidance for local policies and programs. While human trafficking is a global issue, it is usually experienced at a local and very personal level. International partnerships on complex problems like ours cannot rig results. We must strengthen rigor and science within the local context. We are also very excited to announce that we are starting similar work in the Cambia region this year, that is in the western side of Sierra Leone. I will be remiss if I did not acknowledge my 4 faculty colleagues at APRIES who are key to this work. I am David Okech, and I'm professor at the School of Social Work. Dr. Jody Clay Warner is Distinguished Professor at the University of Georgia Department of Sociology. Dr. Alex Balch is Professor of Politics at the University of Liverpool in the UK. Dr. Nate Hansen is Professor at the University of Georgia College of Public Health. Dr. Tamara Callans is Associate Professor at the University of Georgia College of Public Health. Finally, this is a collective effort. This event would not have been successful without the efforts of several people at APRIES, the Department of State in Washington, D.C., and the US Embassy in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Claire, Umaru, and Rachel were still up late yesterday, putting the finishing touches to this event. This is a collective effort, and we look forward to an even closer collaboration as we address the complex problem of child trafficking in Sierra Leone. I like Salon, as we like to call it, the people and the food, and hope to visit again once international travel is more feasible. Thank you for your attention, and over to you, Mr. Fofana.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. David Okech, for that remarks, and for giving an insight of the prevalence rate of child trafficking in Kenema, Kailan, and Kono. And obviously, our next hotspot is Gambia, and I'm quite sure that we'll get there very soon. And we look forward to welcoming you in Sierra Leone anytime soon. We go to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Mr. Saidou Kano. He is the country director for Sierra Leone at World Hope International. Welcome, Mr. Saidou Kano.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Excellency, the Vice President, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, Honorable Ministers, the APRIS team, staff of the U.S. State Department, the U.S. Embassy in Sierra Leone, the World Hope team, and all other protocols observed. Good afternoon. World Hope International is excited to join you this afternoon to launch the Prevention and Response to Child Trafficking in Persons project. This project aligns with our mission to alleviate suffering and injustice by providing opportunity, dignity, and hope. World Hope International is a key player in efforts to fight human trafficking in Sierra Leone since 2004. We feel honored to be given the privilege to implement this project with APRIES and others. We take this honor as a recognition of our work in the anti-human trafficking space. This project offers World Hope International an opportunity to expand its work on trafficking in persons and will deepen its collaboration with government-led ministries and the Sierra Leone Police to see a significant reduction in child trafficking in Sierra Leone. The project will focus on prevention, protection, and prosecution as key to the overall reduction of child trafficking rates in Sierra Leone. The area of focus will be Kenema, Kono, and Kailan districts, the 3 Ks of Eastern Sierra Leone. This is informed by a research conducted by APRIES in partnership with Conflict Management and Development Associate, CMDA in Sierra Leone. The 3 key objectives are: 1, strengthen the prosecution of perpetrators of child trafficking by working with paramount chiefs and district councils to align and enforce local legal frameworks. We will also be working with survivors to navigate the legal system and advocating with the Ministry of Justice for speedy and decentralized court hearings that will lead to the prosecution and conviction of child traffickers. 2, protect child trafficking survivors through comprehensive care for child survivors, including psychosocial and livelihood support for survivors and their caregivers or parents at the recovery center. And lastly, prevent child trafficking through collaboration with community child protection structures, schools club, religious leaders, local authorities, and like-minded civil society organizations. Why are we focusing on child trafficking? Child trafficking is very prevalent in Sierra Leone and is often masked by the traditional practice of men picking. This is a type of informal fostering of children in which a child is taken away by extended family members or family friends, often for education purposes. The child ends up being trafficked and subjected to forced labor, early marriage, and sex trafficking. Children are also at risk of being trafficked outside the men picking system. A study conducted by GOLD in a consortium partnership with World Hope International and Sierra Leone Labour Congress indicated that out of a sample size of 700, only 55.5% of children are living with their biological parents. Such a situation is a breeding ground for child trafficking, as many end up in the streets, begging and/or hawking. This project could not have been launched at a more appropriate time than during this COVID-19 pandemic. Lockdowns and restrictions make the plight of child survivors go unnoticed. We look forward to working with our various partners, the government-line ministries, especially the Ministry of Social Welfare, the Ministry of Gender and Children's Affairs, local government and Ministry of Justice, and community stakeholders to reduce child trafficking in Sierra Leone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Saidu Kano. Indeed, our implementing partners have gone a long way in the co-design process. I thank you so much. I am now honored to introduce the keynote speaker for this program, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh. He is the current Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. He holds a PhD in political science from the University of Bordeaux, France. Before the 2018 elections, he was a Sahel advisor to the Special Representative of the Secretary General of the United Nations for West Africa and the Sahel. In that capacity, he co-led the elaboration of the United Nations strategy on the Sahel and worked closely with the Peace and Security Architecture for ECOWAS. The African Union-led nurtured process and later the G5 Sahel and several international NGOs active in security and governance issues. Prior to that, he worked for the International Crisis Group as an analyst for West Africa. He has spent most of his professional career in the governance and security sectors in West Africa in his current capacity as the Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone. He is keen to serve his people and ignite sustainable transformative development through his government's flagship program on human capital development. Again, please join me to welcome the Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh. I thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Fofana. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon from this end of the Atlantic. I want to first of all thank you very much for inviting me to give the keynote address to such a very important event that is so very close to the heart of this nation. And I also want to take the opportunity to thank speakers, particularly Dr. Carrie Johnston and Ms. Ellen French, for their acknowledgement of the effort we are making as a government to combat human trafficking. Personally, for me, it is a great honor and pleasure to be connected with all of you today to launch the Sierra Leone program against child trafficking led by the African Programming and Research Initiative to End Slavery, APRIES, which is based in the University of Georgia School of Social Work in the United States, with collaboration from the University of Liverpool in the United Kingdom. Trafficking is an issue that has become very close, not only to my heart, but like I said, to the soul of this nation over the past 3 years. I've been championing government efforts against the scourge of modern slavery in close collaboration with the Minister of Social Welfare and the Minister of Justice. I want to firstly take the opportunity to reiterate our government's deep and unwavering commitment to the identification, prevention, and prosecution of all forms of trafficking. As we have learned in the battle to contain the COVID-19 pandemic that has disseminated decimated many of our economies and crippled healthcare systems in even the most advanced countries. The fight against trafficking is only as strong as the weakest link. The forced movement of men, women, and children across and within borders into deplorable situations of servitude and under unconscionable predicaments remain prevalent, where there is slow global convergence on strategies and coordination mechanisms to decisively and aggressively eradicate this malaise. That global convergence needs to start within each of our countries and grow to regional platforms like the Mano River Union, the Economic Community of West African States, and the African Union, if we are to make meaningful headway to end modern slavery. As the world becomes even more integrated in the age of rapid globalization, we are contending with unequal growth and economic development amongst our countries, which is spurring citizens in less developed nations to seek better opportunities elsewhere. In countries in Africa, we are seeing the mass exodus of our young people from rural areas to cities. And in more recent times, our young people making the perilous temple run to Europe and other destinations in search of work, food, security, education, and hope. Hope for the promise of a better future. It is this hope in the midst of hopelessness that creates the conditions for traffickers to take advantage of victims seeking better life and economic prospect. It is these factors that we must seriously address within our countries in order to support a global coalition around an agenda to eradicate trafficking. These intentional actions must be informed by research and analysis at national, subnational, community, and household. The fight must start in our communities to prevent and protect our most vulnerable population from trafficking, but also understanding the why. As many of you know, I was a university scholar in my previous life, so I appreciate the convergence between data and decision-making to ensure sustainable and measurable actions to solve real-world problems. To this end, I am very excited about the work of APRIES and their focus on supporting the efforts of government to protect children and provide them with a future. Specifically, APRIES' goal of reducing the number of children that are in child labor or being trafficked, which denies them the opportunity of going to school and other progressive life choices, is a laudable one. I understand that APRIES, in collaboration with the Ministry of Social Welfare and SIMDA, has been able to undertake qualitative analysis on the policy gaps to protect children against trafficking, and in 2020, conducted quantitative studies to understand the scope of trafficking in Kailaun, Kono, and Kenema. The evidence illustrates that trafficking of children is prevalent in these areas, with the highest incidence, 16% in Kono. The only thing I realized from your research that you like the case, because you have exhausted the case in the Eastern Province, the Kono, the Kailaun, and Kenema. Now you are moving to the north to take Kambia. And I will not be surprised that you move from Kambia to Koinadugu. But at least, I don't know what is the special law for the case, but I realized that you are only targeting districts and regions that have the K names. In any case, I will not interrogate that research method. I will just encourage you to choose other letters in the future other than the case in Sierra Leone. These findings, to go back to your research, these findings have a direct impact on government flagship project which seeks to provide free and quality education to ensure that no child is left behind. Many of you have heard President Julius Maada Bio talk about radical inclusion. by dismantling all barriers, including sex, economic status, fiscal disability, to ensure that all children in Sierra Leone have equal and equitable access to education. This is a direct response to the plight of the lost generation that faced the consequences of the brutal 11-year civil war, and as a result, we are not able to enjoy a quality education because they had to flee for their lives, or we are captured and forced to bear arms. Through the free and quality education program, this government intends to cultivate a promising future for Sierra Leone's most dynamic and sustainable resource, its young people. Today, Sierra Leone can boast of 2.5 million children having access to education, with one of the highest regional expenditure on education as a percentage of GDP, to provide the much needed infrastructure, teachers, and nutrition to ensure that our children have a chance of a brighter future. On the impact of trafficking on girls and school-age girls, more specifically, we see that they are being forced into situations of not only labor, but unsafe environment, which increases their vulnerability and creates opportunity for violent abuse and rape. This suggests that there's a strong need to advocate for the girl child to thwart a culture of tolerance of violence against them, including rape, sexual abuse, and forced servitude. In a country where over 50% of the population are women, and amongst this group, a significant portion are young girls, we have a moral obligation to protect each of them. Government has already made significant strides by introducing tougher penalties for perpetrators of rape and sexual violence, and between 2019 and 2020, we have seen more severe sentences handed down to perpetrators. My office has also led the coordination of governance, government ministries, departments, and agencies to develop a rapid action plan to identify, prevent, prosecute trafficking, and protect survivors, which has resulted in the following achievements. 1, securing of 5 convictions for perpetrators of trafficking, the first since the anti-trafficking law was passed in 2005. Second, government has collaborated with World Hope International to operate the only shelter for trafficking in Sierra Leone. 3, more funding has been made available by government to increase awareness on human trafficking and irregular migration. And 4, government has established an anti-trafficking task force in all the districts, giving it focus on decentralized and community-based remedies to ensure sustainable interventions to prevent trafficking. The work of APRIES in Sierra Leone is extremely timely because it will support the government to more meaningfully address the nexus between trafficking and the broader protection of our children, to ensure that they have access to education and other opportunities to become productive members of society. In line with government's push for the decentralization of the government service delivery apparatus, which is led by my office, this program strategy to engage with communities to understand the gaps in the legal framework, identify context-specific interventions to secure convictions, and even more innovative, a victim-centric approach to support redress and reintegration of survivors using pragmatic solutions is certainly welcome. I encourage you to work with local leadership structures to fully implement national policies and laws that inform the strategies to prosecute traffickers. We must take deliberate and targeted action to make trafficking risky and expensive by dealing with entrenched problems of impunity and laying a solid foundation for rule of law to be applied. I also want to encourage the use of village parent groups to aid in the identification of trafficking and the engagement of school-based organizations and other activities to support your prevention work. We have seen how effective The Hands Off Our Girls campaign led by the First Lady has been in advocating for the interests of girls, and as a government, we are keen to build on homegrown strategies that are successful and can effectively amplify our advocacy efforts to protect children. However, I want to encourage you to explore new areas more comprehensively, the issues of poverty, inequality, and political instability that creates the push factors that result in our young and other vulnerable people being taken advantage of and placed in deplorable labor conditions on the promise of having access to better opportunities. Also, when we talk about reintegration into communities and realistic strategies to prevent re-victimization, beyond the psychosocial support to deal with traumas, we should also consider providing economic opportunities to these families to address the push factors. Further, as initially premised, we need to understand the regional dynamics with the MRU and ECOWAS of trafficking in order to build a more robust coordination platform to support victim identification and prosecution and expose trafficking rings and chains that many times don't operate within the confines of national boundaries. I am very excited when I was listening to Dr. Okech saying that they have conducted research, they are doing work in Senegal and Conakry. I think this kind of regional dimensions is going to feed into the next stage we want to move in this part of the world in the area of trafficking. And I want to use the opportunity to announce that just on Friday, His Excellency the President has instructed that we organize a national conference, a national stakeholders conference on trafficking in persons in Sierra Leone at the first stage. And following that, before the end of the year, we are going to organize a regional conference where we will invite all ECOWAS countries, including Mauritania, to participate in a regional conference, because we have realized as a government that whatever efforts that we do at the national level, if we don't plug in the regional dynamics, which is the weakest link, then today it will be very, very difficult to engage in absolute actions that will halt trafficking. So our government has decided to take the bold step to invest in this so that at least we can plug our activities into a broad-wide regional network. We are bringing in Mano River Union, but more importantly, we are bringing in ECOWAS. So in the next couple of weeks, we are going to draft and come up with a note, a conceptual note, to establish the fundamental basis for the organization of a national stakeholders conference, and that will further lead us into the regional conference we are going to hold on trafficking in persons. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I believe when you look at the work, the wonderful work that APRIES is doing, there is no doubt that that research, that data, that analysis is going to feed into what we want to do in the next couple of months, accumulating in the regional conference on trafficking in persons in West Africa, where we are going to also invite Mauritania to participate. Already, my president has started discussions in that direction, and we are going to engage ECOWAS as an institution so that we can set up the platform for the success of that conference. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I would like to conclude by recognizing, first of all, the long and strong partnership between Sierra Leone and the US government on anti-trafficking efforts over the years, and most recently through the Department of State Office to Monitor and Combat Trafficking in Persons program to end modern slavery. And I believe and I'm confident that APRIS is a wonderful addition to that long-standing partnership. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the collaboration between APRIS and local partners like CMDA, as well as World Hope International, is no doubt, World Hope International is no doubt a laudable one, because this kind of partnership provides the opportunity for APRIS and international researchers to have a groundbreaking insight into looking at local, what we usually call in social science research, a bottom-top approach. And we are very excited for that kind of collaboration. While I want to wish you success in your project to protect survivors, prevent child trafficking, and ensure prosecution, we look forward to building a strategic partnership with you to strengthen the policy gaps at all levels, while at the same time establish solid prevention measures rooted in the concrete realities of the communities of where you are engaged and where you want to conduct your research. And I believe the two big conferences we want to organize, both at the national and regional level, is a good entry point for such collaborations. On that note, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, with these few words, I now officially launch the Sierra Leone Child Trafficking Program led by APRIES. I thank you very much for your time and your good work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Vice President, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, for that great remarks, keynote speech. We are very much grateful for highlighting these issues and the developments made by the government of Sierra Leone. And we look forward for the National Stakeholder Conference and the regional one. As you've likely mentioned, this will be an entry point for APRIS to collaborate a little bit more with the government of Sierra Leone. And we'll be also very much happy to share our data, our findings on child trafficking in Sierra Leone at that platform. You mentioned about using the bottom-top approach, which is very much critical, working with communities, and that is really part of our strategy going forward. And we all know that there are a lot of policies in Sierra Leone, but sometimes there are gaps that needs to be looked at and maybe reviewed. And we are also very much ready and in place to work with government ministries to look at these policies and see how we could strengthen them to make sure they are more effective and help to reduce the prevalence of child trafficking. We are very much honored to have your presence here today. And on behalf of APRIS, I want to thank you very much. We now come to drawing down of the curtains of this virtual public launch event. It's been a pleasure to have you all here today and to be able to present our perspective before you all. I want to specifically again thank the Honorable Vice President of the Republic of Sierra Leone, Dr. Mohamed Juldeh Jalloh, the government ministers, the U.S. Department of State, the U.S. Embassy, colleagues of APRIES and the University of Georgia, World Hope International, and our able and dynamic host, Dr. Clara Bolton. As stated by the Vice President, child trafficking lies in the heart of the government of Sierra Leone. And we have already seen the political will to combat child trafficking in the country. In the next few weeks, we will be engaging with the government through its ministries and key stakeholders in the ecosystem to discuss next steps on program rollout plans. I thank you all for your attention, and I wish you all a great day. I thank you.